Sergeant Hyun-woo Park stood at attention in the observation deck of the UES Harmony. His black uniform was crisp and clean. The silver eagle on his collar caught the light from the viewing windows. Outside, space looked calm and peaceful. Stars dotted the darkness like tiny diamonds, but Hyun-woo knew peace was fragile. He had learned that lesson many times during his 8 years as a Marine. The ship hummed quietly around him. The Harmony was one of Earth's newest diplomatic vessels. It carried the best technology humanity had to offer. Soft blue lights lined the corridors. The walls were painted white and gray. Everything looked clean and friendly. That was the point. Humans were supposed to be the friendly species in the Galactic Coalition. Sergeant Park, report to Conference Room Alpha, came a voice over the intercom. Hyun-woo walked through the ship's corridors. He passed other crew members going about their duties. Most were civilians. Scientists, diplomats, translators. They all looked excited about the upcoming meeting. Hyun-woo was not excited. He was worried. Conference Room Alpha was large and bright. A long table sat in the center. Around it were chairs designed for different alien species. Some were tall and narrow. Others were wide and low. The humans sat in normal chairs that looked small compared to the others. Ambassador Jin Kim sat at the head of the table. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. She had spent her whole career making peace between different species. She believed strongly that all problems could be solved with words. Captain Dong-Soo Lee stood near the viewing screen. He was a former Navy pilot with scars on his hands from an old accident. Unlike the ambassador, he looked tense. His eyes kept moving to the weapons display on his belt. Sergeant Park, Ambassador Kim said with a smile. Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat. Hyun-woo sat down next to Private Tae Ho Choi. The young Marine was only 22 years old. This was his first mission off Earth. His eyes were wide with wonder at everything he saw. The Valkyrie delegation will arrive in 1 hour, Ambassador Kim explained. This meeting is very important. The Valkyrie Empire has been expanding into the Outer Rim territories. Several coalition worlds have reported aggressive actions. She touched a button and the viewing screen showed a star map. Red dots marked Valkyrie territory. It had grown much larger in the past year. Our job is to find a peaceful solution, the ambassador continued. The coalition believes diplomacy is always better than war. Captain Lee spoke up. Ma'am, I've reviewed the Valkyrie military reports. They have been very aggressive. 3 freighter convoys have gone missing near their borders. A mining station went silent last week. I understand your concerns, Captain, Ambassador Kim replied. But we must give peace a chance. Violence should always be the last option. Hyun-woo said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He had read the same reports. The missing ships carried families. The mining station had children living on it. In his experience, aggressive species did not stop being aggressive because of nice words. An hour later, the Valkyrie ship appeared outside the viewing windows. It was massive and dark. Black metal covered its surface. Weapon ports were clearly visible along its hull. It looked like it was built for war, not diplomacy. The Valkyrie delegation came aboard through the docking bay. Hyun-woo and the other Marines escorted them to the conference room. As they walked, Hyun-woo studied their guests. The Valkyrie were tall and thin. Their skin was gray and covered with small scales. They had long arms and sharp claws at the end of their fingers. Their faces were narrow with large yellow eyes. When they walked, they moved like predators hunting prey. The leader of the delegation was Commander Thex 9. He wore a uniform covered with medals and ribbons. When he looked at the humans, his expression showed amusement, like he was watching children play with toys. Welcome aboard the Harmony, Ambassador Kim said as they entered the conference room. I am Ambassador Jin Kim. We are honored to meet with you. Commander Thex 9 looked around the room. His yellow eyes stopped on each human face. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans, he said in accented English. So small, so soft. The galaxy says you are warriors, but I see only... He waved a clawed hand. What is the word prey? Ambassador Kim smiled, though it looked forced. We believe that strength comes from cooperation, not conflict. The coalition has brought peace to hundreds of worlds. Peace, Commander Thex 9 repeated. He sat down in one of the large chairs. The other Valkyrie remained standing behind him. Yes, we have heard of your peace. Very interesting. Very weak, Captain Lee stepped forward. Commander, we're here to discuss the recent incidents near your borders. Several of our ships have disappeared. Commander Thex 9 tilted his head. Disappeared? Perhaps they got lost. Space is very large, very dangerous for soft creatures. Hyunwoo felt his hands clench into fists. The Valkyrie was playing games, making jokes about dead families. But he remained still and quiet. These were not his orders to give. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Ambassador Kim tried to negotiate. She offered trade agreements, resource sharing, even territory concessions. Commander Thex-9 listened with that same amused expression. Sometimes he made comments about human weakness. Sometimes he just stared at them with his yellow eyes. Finally, Commander Thex-9 stood up. "This has been very educational," he said. "We have learned much about humans today. You are exactly as we expected." "Does this mean you'll consider our proposals?" Ambassador Kim asked hopefully. "Oh, we will consider everything," the Valkyrie commander replied. "Every word, every weakness, every fear we saw in your eyes today." After the Valkyrie left, the conference room fell silent. Ambassador Kim looked tired and disappointed. Captain Lee was studying the star charts with a worried expression. Private Choi leaned over to Hyunwoo. "Sergeant, do you think the talks went well?" Hyunwoo looked at the young Marine. Choi was still hopeful, still believing that everything would work out. Hyunwoo remembered being that young once, before he learned that some problems could not be solved with words. "No," Hyunwoo said quietly. "I think we just showed them exactly what they wanted to see." 3 days later, the emergency alert came through. The communication was from Kepler 442b, a human colony world with 30,000 people. The message was short and desperate. "Under attack. Valkyrie forces. They came without warning. Civilian targets, schools, hospitals, please send help." Then the signal went dead. Hyunwoo stood in his quarters reading the casualty reports. 30,000 dead. Men, women, children. Families who had trusted that diplomacy would keep them safe. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. For 15 years, humanity had tried to be the peaceful species, the friendly species, the ones who solved problems with words instead of weapons. The galaxy thought humans were soft, weak, prey animals with no teeth. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Coalition headquarters was chaos. Alien species from across the galaxy gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Their voices filled the air with dozens of different languages. Emergency lights flashed red on every wall. General Su Jin-yoon stood at the main briefing table. She was 55 years old with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. Her uniform carried ribbons from the Titan War, where she had earned her reputation fighting pirates in the asteroid belt. Around her stood the Coalition's military leaders. Commander Veltar of the Kethani looked like a giant lizard with blue scales and 4 arms. General Haxvor of the Deneb species resembled a walking tree with thick bark skin. All of them were larger and stronger than the humans. "The Valkyrie attack on Kepler 442b was unprovoked," General Yoon said. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. 30,000 civilians are dead. This cannot go unanswered." Commander Veltar nodded his massive head. "My warriors are ready for battle. The Kethani have fought the Valkyrie before. We know their tactics." "Good," General Yoon replied. "What do you recommend?" "Standard Coalition doctrine," Veltar explained. "We assemble a combined fleet, multiple species working together. We engage their military targets only. We follow the rules of civilized warfare." General Haxvor agreed. His voice sounded like wind through leaves. "The Deneb will provide support ships. Our shields are strong. Our weapons are accurate. We will defeat them with honor." General Yoon looked around the table. Every alien species had similar plans. Fight with honor, follow the rules, protect civilians. It was the Coalition way. But General Yoon remembered the footage from Kepler 442b. She remembered the schools that had been bombed, the hospitals that had been burned, the children who had died screaming. "Where do you want human forces?" she asked. Commander Veltar looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps logistics support? Medical assistance? Humans are emotional. War requires clear thinking." "You mean humans are weak?" General Yoon said flatly. "Not weak," Veltar replied quickly, "but not warriors. You have no natural weapons, no thick skin, no combat instincts. Your own reports show you avoid violence whenever possible." General Yoon smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Perhaps that is changing. 3 weeks later, the Coalition fleet assembled near the Rigel system. It was impressive. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, each one following their ancient traditions of warfare. Sergeant Hyun-woo Park stood in the hangar bay of the UES Retribution. Around him, other Marines checked their equipment. They had been assigned to provide medical support and communications. Private Tai-ho Choi looked nervous. "Sergeant, why aren't we fighting with the others?" Hyun-woo adjusted his rifle strap. "Because they think we're too soft for real combat." "Are we?" Hyun-woo thought about the videos from Kepler 442b. He thought about a little girl named Sumin, who had been in the colony school. Her parents had sent her picture in their last message before the attack. "No," he said quietly. "We're not. The first battle happened near the Vega colony. The coalition fleet met a Velkari force of equal size. Commander Veltar led the attack with traditional Kathani tactics. His ships formed straight lines and fired at the enemy ships in organized volleys. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the coalition had won, but barely. They had lost 40 ships and 3,000 soldiers. The Velkari had retreated in good order. Worse, the Velkari had used coalition prisoners as human shields. When the alien commanders saw their own people being used as protection, they hesitated. The Velkari used that hesitation to escape. Commander Veltar was frustrated. They fight without honor. They break the rules of warfare. General Yoon listened to the battle reports from the flagship's bridge. Dr. Mi-young-shin, the military psychologist, stood beside her. The doctor was studying the stress levels of the different species after combat. "The alien forces are following doctrine perfectly," Dr. Shin observed. "But their doctrine assumes the enemy will follow the same rules." "And the Velkari don't," General Yoon replied. "No, they adapt. They use our morality against us." General Yoon was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated the communication system. "Sergeant Park, report to the bridge." Hyun-woo arrived 20 minutes later. He saluted the general and waited. "Sergeant, I'm giving you independent operational command," General Yoon said. "Take your Marines and hit the Velkari supply depot at Proxima 7. No alien backup. No coalition oversight." Hyun-woo's eyes sharpened. "Rules of engagement, ma'am." General Yoon looked out at the stars. She thought about Sumin and the other children. She thought about the coalition's rules and honor and civilized warfare. "Win," she said simply. Dr. Shin looked worried. "General, the coalition tribunal will investigate any unusual tactics." General Yoon turned to face her. "Doctor, what did the tribunals do to prevent Kepler 442b?" The psychologist had no answer. Hyun-woo smiled for the first time in weeks. It was not a nice smile. "Ma'am, what about war crimes?" "Sergeant," General Yoon replied, "the Velkari already committed the only war crime that matters. They started this." 2 days later, Hyun-woo led 50 Marines to the Proxima 7 system. The supply depot was heavily defended. Velkari ships patrolled the area. Ground batteries covered all approaches. A traditional coalition attack would have cost hundreds of lives. Hyun-woo had studied different tactics. Not coalition tactics, human tactics. Methods his species had developed over thousands of years of warfare on Earth. Instead of attacking the depot directly, the Marines hit the patrol ships first. But they did not fight fair. They used the asteroid field to hide. They struck from behind. When Velkari ships came to investigate, they found only wreckage and silence. Then the Marines landed on the depot. They did not announce themselves. They did not demand surrender. They came in the middle of the night cycle when the Velkari were sleeping. Corporal Woo Jin Nam disabled the communication systems first. No calls for help. No warnings to other bases. The depot was cut off from the outside galaxy. The Marines moved through the facility like ghosts. They knew exactly where to go. Intelligence Officer Captain Hee-jin Ryu had studied the depot's layout for days. Every room, every corridor, every weakness. The Velkari guards were trained to fight other Velkari. They expected frontal attacks and challenges to single combat. They did not expect humans to crawl through ventilation shafts. They did not expect explosives placed in their sleeping quarters. The battle was over in 3 hours. The depot was destroyed. All supplies were gone. Every Velkari soldier was dead, but Hyun-woo left one survivor. A communications officer named Thektu. The Marine gave him a simple message: to carry back to Velkari Command. Tell your leaders that humans are no longer playing by coalition. When Commander Veltar heard about the depot attack, he was shocked. This is not how civilized species fight wars. General Yoon looked at the casualty reports. 50 Marines had destroyed a major enemy base. 0 human casualties. The enemy had lost 300 soldiers and millions of credits worth of supplies. Maybe civilization is overrated, she said. Dr. Shin was studying the psychological reports from Hyunwoo's unit. The Marines showed no signs of combat stress. Instead, they seemed more focused, more determined, like they had found something they were good at, something they enjoyed. General, Dr. Shin said carefully, I think we may have opened a door that we cannot close. General Yoon thought about the children of Kepler 442b. Then she thought about the fear she had seen in the surviving Velkari's eyes. Good, she said. Lieutenant Colonel Byung-ho An stood in the briefing room of the Human Forward Base. The walls were covered with maps and photographs. Red pins marked Velkari positions. Black pins marked targets that no longer existed. In the 3 weeks since Proxima 7, human forces had operated independently. They struck fast and disappeared. Supply convoys vanished. Communication relays went silent. Entire Velkari outposts simply stopped responding to calls. Intelligence reports that Velkari morale is dropping, Captain Hyojin Ryu announced to the assembled officers. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who spoke 5 alien languages. Their soldiers are requesting transfers away from human operational zones. Sergeant Major In-soo Kang laughed. He was a big man with scars on his arms from handling explosives. They should have thought of that before they killed our people. Hyunwoo studied the tactical display. He had been promoted to major after the success at Proxima 7. His unit, now called Ghost Company, had become legend among human forces. What's our next target? He asked. Colonel An pointed to a system near the edge of Velkari space. Communication hub at Altair 3. It coordinates their fleet movements across 6 sectors. Take it out and their ships will be flying blind. Defenses? Heavy 2,000 Velkari Marines. Orbital weapons platforms. Shield generators. The colonel paused. Coalition Command says it's impossible to take with less than 10,000 troops. Hyunwoo smiled. Coalition Command still thinks we fight fair. That night, Ghost Company prepared for the mission. 50 Marines cleaned their weapons and checked their gear. They moved quietly and efficiently. No jokes, no complaints. They had become something different from the soldiers who had started this war. Private Sun Ho Bei was adjusting his sniper rifle scope. He was only 20 years old but had already killed 37 Velkari from distances they thought were impossible. His hands were steady and his eyes were cold. Sergeant, he asked Sergeant Major Kang, are we going to take prisoners this time? Kang looked up from his explosive charges. Depends. Are they going to surrender? Probably not. Then probably not. The assault began at Oru 300 local time. But it did not begin with ships or missiles. It began with Private Choi, who had become an expert at electronic warfare. He used quantum tunneling to bypass the Velkari computer defenses. Within minutes, he had control of their internal systems. The lights went out across the base. Then the air recycling stopped. Then the artificial gravity failed. In the darkness and confusion, Ghost Company struck. They did not come through the main entrance. They cut through the hull with plasma torches and entered through maintenance shafts. They moved through the base like a plague, killing quickly and silently. The Velkari tried to organize a defense, but every time they gathered in groups, explosions would tear them apart. Sergeant Major Kang had placed charges throughout the base structure. He could make any room disappear at will. Captain Ryu had studied Velkari psychology for months. She knew they relied on their commanders for orders, so the first targets were always the officers. Without leadership, Velkari soldiers became confused and frightened. By dawn, the base was secure. 2,000 Velkari were dead. The communication hub was destroyed. Ghost Company had lost 3 Marines, but this time there were survivors. 50 Velkari soldiers who had surrendered when they realized fighting was hopeless. Hyunwoo walked among the prisoners. They cowered when they saw him coming. Word had spread through the Velkari fleet about the human commander who showed no mercy. You will carry a message to your leadership, he told them in their own language. Captain Ryu had taught him the words. Tell them that every day this war continues, we will become more creative. Tell them that we have barely started to show them what humans can do. The prisoners were released with a single transport ship. As they fled the system, they carried something more dangerous than any weapon. They carried fear. Back at Coalition headquarters, the alien commanders were growing concerned. Commander Veltar requested a meeting with General Yoon. General, we must discuss human tactics, he said. His blue scales had turned darker, a sign of stress among his people. What about them? They are disturbing. Your forces do not follow proper military protocol. They strike at night. They target supply lines. They show no mercy to defeated enemies. General Yoon looked at the casualty reports. Human losses were minimal. Velkari losses were catastrophic. Are you saying our tactics are ineffective? No, Veltar admitted. They are extremely effective. That is what concerns us. Dr. Mi Young-shin had been studying the psychological profiles of human soldiers. What she found worried her. The stress and trauma that normally affected warriors was absent. Instead, human soldiers showed increased focus and determination. General, she reported, our people are adapting to warfare in ways I've never seen. They are not just fighting. They are learning, evolving. Is that bad? Dr. Shin hesitated. I'm not sure they can go back to what they were before. Meanwhile, at the Velkari High Command, military analysts were trying to understand human behavior. Commander Zephal was their best strategic mind. He had studied every species in the galaxy, but humans confused him. They do not fight like any warrior race I know, he reported to the Velkari leadership. They use deception. They target morale instead of military strength. They make war personal. Are they cowards? Asked Supreme Commander Vex Prime. No, Zephal replied. Cowards run from battle. Humans hunt their enemies. They make them disappear. Our soldiers are more afraid of humans than they are of death. Back on Earth, news reports showed the success of human forces. But they did not show the methods. The public saw victory. They did not see what victory cost. Major Hyunwoo Park sat in his quarters, writing a letter to the parents of Sumin, the little girl who had died at Kepler 442b. He wrote the same letter every week. It was always the same message: we have not forgotten. We will make them pay. Outside his window, he could see Ghost Company preparing for their next mission. Sergeant Major Kang was teaching new recruits how to make explosives from medical supplies. Private Bay was training them to kill from impossible distances. Captain Ryu was showing them how to break enemy morale without firing a shot. They were no longer the same Marines who had escorted diplomats and carried medical supplies. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, something that scared even their allies. Hyunwoo finished his letter and sealed it. Tomorrow they would hit another target. More Velkari would die. The war would continue, but tonight he slept peacefully. For the first time since Kepler 442b, he felt like they were making progress. The galaxy thought humans were soft because they chose peace over war. They were about to learn that choosing peace was not the same as being unable to fight. And they were about to discover that when humans decided to make war, they did it better than anyone else in the galaxy. The video message arrived at Coalition headquarters at 800 hours. General Sujin Yoon was drinking her morning coffee when her aide brought her the encrypted transmission. Ma'am, this came from the Velkari High Command. It's marked as urgent. Yoon activated the display. The screen showed a large room with metal walls. 20 human prisoners knelt in a line. They wore the uniforms of the merchant marine crew from the transport ship Morning Star. A Velkari officer stepped into view. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I am Commander Thex 9. You remember me, I think. We met for peaceful talks many weeks ago. Yoon's jaw tightened. She remembered the arrogant alien who had mocked human diplomacy. Your Ghost Company has caused us some inconvenience, Thex 9 continued, so we decided to send a message of our own. He drew his sidearm and shot the first prisoner in the head. For every base you destroy, we will execute 10 humans, he said, moving to the second prisoner. For every ship you sink, we will execute 20. The second prisoner died. Your people think they can fight without rules, Thex 9 said, killing the third prisoner. Let us see how long that lasts when the blood of innocents is on your hands. The executions continued until all 20 prisoners were dead. Then Thex 9 smiled at the camera. We broadcast this message to every human colony in the galaxy. They all know what happens when their soldiers play at being warriors. Good day, General Yoon. The screen went dark. Yoon sat in silence for a long moment. Then she activated her communication system. Get me Major Park. Priority Alpha. 30 minutes later, Hyunwoo stood in the general's office. He had watched the execution video 3 times. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were clenched into fists. Orders, ma'am? The gloves are off, Major, completely off. I'm authorizing unrestricted warfare protocols. Hyun-woo's eyes sharpened. Define unrestricted. No rules, no limits. No mercy. Yoon looked directly at him. Win this war, Major. I don't care how you do it. Within 6 hours, Ghost Company was aboard the stealth ship Silence. Major Youngsiko had joined them. He was a specialist in psychological warfare who had studied at the Tokyo Institute of Advanced Interrogation. Our target is the Valkyrie prison ship Torment, Major O explained as they traveled through hyperspace. It holds 300 human prisoners, including civilians from the Morning Star. Defenses? Hyun-woo asked. Minimal. They don't expect rescue attempts this deep in their territory. Sergeant Kyung-mi Park looked up from her medical kit. She was no longer just a combat medic. Over the past month, she had become an expert in alien physiology. She knew exactly how to keep enemies alive while causing maximum pain. What about the prisoners? She asked. Some may be too injured to move. We extract who we can, Hyun-woo replied. The others we make comfortable, she understood. In their new vocabulary, making someone comfortable meant ending their suffering quickly. The Torment was a massive ship designed to hold thousands of prisoners. It moved slowly through space, protected by only 2 escort vessels. The Valkyrie had grown complacent about their rear areas. That was their mistake. Warrant Officer Jae Sung-ko disabled the escort ships with computer viruses that turned their own weapons against them. The explosions were visible for thousands of kilometers. Ghost Company boarded the Torment through its docking bay. They moved through the ship systematically, but this time they were not just killing. They were sending a message. Every Valkyrie guard they found was taken alive. Sergeant Park used her new skills to keep them conscious while removing non-essential body parts. The screaming echoed through the ship's corridors. In the prison levels, they found horrors that made even hardened Marines sick. Human prisoners had been tortured for weeks. Many were barely alive. Some begged to die. Hyun-woo granted those requests personally. But 63 prisoners could still be saved. As Ghost Company prepared to evacuate them, Major O was busy in the ship's communication center. I'm broadcasting everything live to the Valkyrie fleet, he explained. Every ship in their navy is watching us kill their people the same way they killed ours. Good, Hyun-woo replied. He was standing over the body of a Valkyrie officer who had tried to use a human child as a shield. The alien's death had not been quick. Before they left the Torment, Hyun-woo recorded a message. He stood in the ship's command center surrounded by Valkyrie bodies. This is Major Park of the Earth Marine Corps, he said to the camera. Every human you kill, we will kill 100 of your people. Every prisoner you torture, we will torture 1,000 of yours. We are no longer bound by the rules of civilized warfare. He picked up a Valkyrie skull from the floor. It still had strips of flesh attached. Because you taught us that civilization is weakness. The message was broadcast on every Valkyrie frequency. Within hours, it had spread throughout their empire. The reaction was immediate. Valkyrie ships began retreating from human territories. Their ground forces abandoned forward positions. Entire fleets requested reassignment away from human operational zones, but the coalition allies were horrified. Commander, Veltar demanded an emergency meeting with General Yoon. The massive Kathani scales had turned pale blue with distress. General, this cannot continue. Your forces are committing atrocities, are they? Yoon asked calmly. Or are they using the same tactics the Valkyrie used first? It does not matter who started it. The coalition has standards, rules we cannot allow. Commander, Yoon interrupted. How many coalition species have lost civilians to Valkyrie attacks? Veltar hesitated. Several. But we do not respond with, how many of your children have died screaming? The alien fell silent. 30,000 humans died at Kepler 442b, Yoon continued. The Morning Star crew was executed for the entertainment of their empire. My soldiers are responding proportionally. This is not proportion, Veltar protested. This is madness. Dr. Mi Young-shin had been documenting the psychological changes in human forces. Her reports made disturbing reading. General, our soldiers are exhibiting behaviors I've never seen before, she reported. They show no signs of combat trauma. Instead, they seem energized by violence. Is that necessarily bad? I don't know. But they're not the same people who started this war. Sergeant Park used to be a medic who saved lives. Now she's an expert in prolonging death. Private Choi was a communications specialist. Now he can turn enemy ships into weapons against themselves. Yoon looked at the casualty reports. Human losses had dropped to almost zero. Velkari losses were catastrophic. Doctor, are you suggesting we go back to losing? I'm suggesting we consider what we're becoming. Meanwhile, on the Velkari homeworld, Supreme Commander Vex Prime was facing his own crisis. Half his fleet had requested transfers to fight anyone except humans. The other half was demanding immediate peace negotiations. Commander Zephal presented his latest analysis. Sir, human military doctrine has evolved beyond our understanding. They no longer fight like any known species. What do you mean? They fight like humans. And we have no counter for that. Vex Prime studied the intelligence reports. Human forces were using chemical weapons made from industrial supplies. They were targeting families of Velkari officers. They had started taking trophies from their victims. Are they insane? He asked. No, sir. That's what makes them so dangerous. They're completely rational. They've simply decided that mercy is a luxury they cannot afford. Back on the human flagship, Major Hyunwoo Park was planning his next operation. The target was a Velkari civilian transport carrying government officials and their families. In the old days, before Kepler 442b, he would have protected those civilians. Now he saw them as legitimate military targets. After all, they supported the government that had murdered human children. As he studied the transport's route, he thought about Sumin and the other children who had died. He thought about the Morning Star crew and their final moments, and he felt no guilt about what he was planning to do. The galaxy had taught humans that mercy was weakness. Now they would learn what humans looked like without mercy. Brigadier General Chanwoo Lim stood before the assembled human fleet commanders. The meeting was held aboard the UES Vengeance, humanity's newest and most deadly warship. The walls were lined with battle honors and captured Velkari banners. Gentlemen, ladies, General Lim began, we stand at a crossroads. 6 months ago, the galaxy saw us as weak. Today, the Velkari Empire trembles at the mention of human forces. The assembled officers smiled. These were not the same people who had started the war. Months of unrestricted combat had changed them. Their eyes were harder. Their methods were crueler. They had become something new. But we are not finished, General Lim continued. Intelligence reports that the Velkari are massing their remaining fleets for a final assault. They plan to surround our forward bases and crush us with superior numbers. Colonel Yoon Ji-song activated the tactical display. She was General Lim's strategic planning officer, a woman who had studied every major battle in human history. They have assembled 2,000 ships at the Deneb system. They plan to advance on 3 fronts simultaneously. Master Sergeant Gi-ho John laughed. He was a special operations veteran, whose unit had perfected the art of making entire enemy battalions disappear without a trace. Sounds like they still haven't learned. What do you mean? Asked Lieutenant Jung Ho Yu. He was new to human military doctrine, having transferred from the coalition forces after watching human effectiveness. They think like aliens, Sergeant Jian explained. Big fleets. Frontal attacks. Honor and glory. They don't understand that humans fight differently. General Lim nodded. Exactly. Which brings us to Operation Pusan Perimeter. The name came from an ancient Earth battle where human forces had allowed themselves to be surrounded, then systematically destroyed the encircling enemy. It was a tactic that required nerves of steel and absolute faith in human adaptability. We're going to let them surround us, General Lim explained. Our forward bases will appear to be cut off and helpless. The Velkari will move in for the kill. And then? Asked Colonel Song. Then we show them what happens when you corner a human. The plan was complex and dangerous. Human forces would appear to retreat, abandoning their outer positions. The Velkari would advance, confident in their superior numbers. They would surround the remaining human bases. Then the trap would spring. 3 weeks later, the Velkari fleet reached the Rigel system. 2,000 ships advanced in perfect formation. Their commanders were confident. They outnumbered the human forces 10-1. What they found was exactly what they expected. 3 human bases apparently cut off and defenseless. The bases sent desperate messages asking for reinforcement. They appeared to be running low on supplies and ammunition. The Velkari commanders were pleased. Finally, they would crush the troublesome humans using superior force. They spread their ships in a wide circle around the human positions. No escape was possible. They began their assault with overwhelming firepower. But something was wrong. The human bases should have fallen quickly. Instead, they seemed to absorb punishment without significant damage. Their shields held. Their weapons kept firing. On the flagship of the Human Defense Force, now Colonel Hyun-woo Park watched the enemy positions on his tactical display. Each Valkyrie ship appeared as a red dot on the screen. There were so many dots that the screen looked like it was bleeding. "All ships in position?" he asked. "Affirmative," replied his communications officer. "The outer fleet is ready." The Valkyrie had made a fatal error. They had assumed the 3 bases represented the entire human force in the system. They had not detected the 200 human ships hidden in the asteroid belt. They had not seen the stealth vessels positioned behind their own lines. "Execute," Hyun-woo ordered. The asteroids came to life. What the Valkyrie had assumed were rocks were actually human ships with their power signatures masked. The stealth vessels dropped their cloaking and appeared directly behind the Valkyrie fleet. In minutes, the hunted had become the hunters. The battle was not a fight. It was an extermination. Human ships attacked from every direction at once. The Valkyrie fleet, spread out in a circle, could not concentrate their firepower effectively. Worse, the humans were using new weapons. Captain Ryu's intelligence section had developed biological agents that targeted Valkyrie physiology specifically. Entire ships went silent as their crews died from engineered plagues. Master Sergeant John's special forces had infiltrated several Valkyrie vessels during the approach. They activated sabotage devices that turned the ship's own systems against their crews. Explosions rippled through the enemy fleet as ships destroyed themselves from within. The Valkyrie tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Every escape route was blocked. Human forces had anticipated every possible move. In 12 hours, 2,000 Valkyrie ships were reduced to debris. Only a handful of survivors escaped to carry word back to their empire. But the Battle of Rigel was just the beginning. Human forces began advancing into Valkyrie territory. But they did not fight like a traditional army. They fought like a plague. Industrial facilities were contaminated with engineered viruses that made them impossible to repair. Water supplies were poisoned with substances that caused madness. Computer networks were infected with programs that turned civilian systems into weapons. The humans had learned to make war personal. They targeted the families of military officers. They hunted government officials in their homes. They made it clear that no Valkyrie was safe anywhere in their empire. Dr. Mi-young-shin tried to document what humanity was becoming, but her reports were classified at the highest levels. What she found was disturbing beyond measure. "General," she reported to General Lim, "our soldiers are no longer exhibiting normal human psychology. They show no empathy for enemy casualties, no remorse for civilian deaths. Some are collecting trophies from their victims." "Are they effective?" General Lim asked. "Extremely. But they're not human anymore. Not in any way that matters." Meanwhile, the coalition was in chaos. The alien members were demanding that human forces be withdrawn immediately. They were horrified by what humanity had become. Commander Veltar made one final plea to General Yoon. "You must stop this. Your species is destroying everything the coalition stands for." The coalition failed to protect human civilians. Yoon replied coldly, "We are protecting ourselves. This is not protection. This is genocide." "Yes," Yoon agreed, "it is." On the Valkyrie homeworld, panic was spreading. Entire families were fleeing to other systems. The government was preparing to evacuate their capital city. Supreme Commander Vex Prime received the final intelligence report from Commander Zefal. His analyst looked exhausted and defeated. "Sir, human forces have developed into something we cannot fight. They do not follow any known military doctrine. They have made war into an art form. What do you recommend? Unconditional surrender immediately, before they decide to exterminate our entire species." Vex Prime looked at the casualty reports. In 6 months, the Valkyrie Empire had lost 60% of their military and 30% of their civilian population. Human losses were less than 1%. "How is this possible?" he asked. "Because we taught them to be monsters," Zefal replied. "And it turns out humans are very good at being monsters." Back in the Human Forward Command, Colonel Hyun-woo Park was planning the final assault on the Valkyrie homeworld. The operation would involve biological weapons that would make the planet uninhabitable for centuries. He felt no guilt about it. The Valkyrie had killed Su-min and 30,000 other innocents. They had executed prisoners for entertainment. They had started this war. Now humanity would finish it. As he worked, he thought about what Dr. Shin had said, that they were no longer human in any way that mattered. He decided she was wrong. They were still human. They were just human without restraint, human without mercy, human without the artificial limits that civilization had placed on them. They were what humans looked like when they decided to make war instead of peace. And they were very, very good at it. The surrender came at 0947 hours Galactic Standard Time. Fleet Admiral Seok Jin Han stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as the message arrived. He was 60 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. 6 months of total war had aged him beyond his years. The transmission was from Supreme Commander Vex Prime of the Velkari Empire. The alien leader appeared on screen, his yellow eyes dull with defeat. Admiral Han, Vex Prime said in broken English, the Velkari Empire formally surrenders to human forces. We accept all terms. We beg only for the survival of our species. Admiral Han looked at the message without emotion. Behind him, his staff officers waited for orders. These were not the same people who had started the war. Months of unrestricted warfare had changed them all. Signal all human forces, Admiral Han commanded. Cease all military operations. The war is over. But even as he gave the order, he wondered if it was true. Could a war like this ever really end? 2 weeks later, the Galactic Coalition convened an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what humanity had become. The great assembly hall was filled with worried voices and fearful eyes. President Na Young-chae represented Earth at the meeting. She was a diplomat who had spent her career building bridges between species. Now she faced a galaxy that feared her people. The human military must be disbanded immediately, declared Ambassador Texvor of the Centauri Union. Their methods violate every principle of civilized warfare. They used biological weapons, added Representative Call9 of the Vegan Collective. They targeted civilians. They committed acts that have no name in our languages. President Chai listened to the accusations calmly. Then she stood to address the assembly. Distinguished representatives, she began, you speak of civilized warfare as if such a thing exists. You forget that this war began with the massacre of 30,000 human civilians, including children. The hall fell silent. For months, you watched as the Velkari committed atrocities against human colonies. You offered thoughts and prayers, but no action. You told us to be patient, to follow proper protocols, to trust in galactic justice. She activated a holographic display showing casualty figures from the war. Human military casualties, 8,000. Velkari military casualties, 2 million. Human civilian casualties, 30,000. Velkari civilian casualties, 12 million. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. You call our methods barbaric, President Che continued. But they ended a war that your civilized methods only prolonged. Every day this conflict continued meant more human children dying. We chose to end it quickly. Commander Veltar of the Kethani rose to speak. His blue scales had turned almost white with stress. Madam President, the galaxy cannot allow such methods to become acceptable. If every species adopted human tactics, then wars would end quickly instead of dragging on for decades, President Che interrupted. Your civilized methods create long conflicts with massive casualties. Our barbaric methods create short conflicts with quick victories. The debate continued for hours. Finally, the coalition reached a decision. Human military doctrine would be classified as a weapon of mass destruction. No species would be allowed to study or copy human methods. Earth's military would be monitored and restricted. President Che agreed to the terms, but with one condition. The galaxy may restrict our military, she said, but never again will you ask us to rely on your protection. Never again will you tell us to trust in galactic justice while our children die. Meanwhile, on a quiet farm on Earth, retired Colonel Hyun-woo Park tended his vegetable garden. The man who had become the galaxy's most feared military commander now grew tomatoes and corn, but he kept his service, rifle loaded in the house. A young reporter had come to interview him for a documentary about the war. Her name was So Young Lee, and she was barely old enough to remember the conflict. Colonel Park, she asked, do you regret the methods your forces used during the war? Hyun-woo looked up from his tomatoes. His hair was graying now, but his eyes were still sharp. Which methods specifically? The biological weapons. the targeting of civilians, the psychological warfare. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Sumin, the little girl who had died at Kepler 442b. He thought about the Morning Star crew in their final moments. "I regret that those methods were necessary," he said finally, "but I do not regret using them. The galaxy calls what you did war crimes. The galaxy calls it war crimes because they lost," Hyunwoo replied. "If the Velkari had won, they would have called it justice." The reporter looked uncomfortable. "But surely there must have been another way." Hyunwoo gestured toward his peaceful farm. "Miss Lee, do you see any Velkari ships attacking this world?" "No, sir." "Do you see any human children dying in alien concentration camps?" "No, sir." Then our methods worked. Across the galaxy, the war had become a cautionary tale. In military academies, students learned about the human doctrine as an example of what happened when civilized restraints were removed. Professor Myung-Ho Park taught the subject at the Galactic War College. He was a historian who had studied every major conflict in galactic history. The human war lasted only 8 months, he explained to his mixed class of alien students, but its impact will last for centuries. It proved that technological superiority and numerical advantage mean nothing against an enemy willing to abandon moral restraints. A young Kethani student raised one of his forearms. "Professor, why were humans so effective? They had no natural weapons, no thick armor, no special abilities." Professor Park smiled sadly. "Because every other species in the galaxy evolved on worlds where survival was possible. Humans evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them. For millions of years they competed against predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other." He showed an image of Earth, with its violent weather and dangerous wildlife. Every human advancement came through conflict. They learned to make tools by fighting for resources. They learned medicine by treating wounds. They learned engineering by building defenses. They learned chemistry by developing poisons. Another student, this one from the Vegan Collective, asked, "But they seemed so peaceful before the war." "They were diplomats and traders. That was their choice," Professor Park explained. "Humans can choose to be peaceful because they are capable of extreme violence. Most species are peaceful because they are incapable of effective warfare. There is a difference." He changed the display to show footage from the Battle of Rigel. "Watch how they fight. No honor, no ceremony, no warning. They strike from darkness, use deception, target weaknesses. They make war the way predators hunt prey." The students watched in fascinated horror as human forces systematically destroyed a fleet 10 times their size. The lesson of the human war, Professor Park concluded, is simple. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never assume that peaceful people are harmless people. And never ever threaten human children. Years later, when new species joined the Galactic Coalition, they received a special briefing about humanity. It was delivered by Ambassador Jin-A Kim, the same woman who had tried to negotiate peace with the Velkari. "Humans are valuable members of the coalition," she would explain. "They are innovative, adaptable, and loyal allies. They prefer diplomacy to warfare and cooperation to conflict." She would pause, making sure she had the attention of every new species. "But if you threaten human civilians, if you harm human children, if you mistake our preference for peace as an inability to make war," she would activate a holographic display showing the ruins of the Velkari homeworld. This is what remains of the last species that made that mistake. The ruins were still radioactive 3 years after the war ended. On quiet nights, Hyunwoo Park would sit on his porch and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien species were building their fleets and training their armies. Some of them probably thought they could defeat humanity if they tried. He hoped they were smart enough not to find out. The galaxy had learned that humans were capable of terrible things when pushed beyond their limits. What they had not learned was that humanity's limits were much further than anyone had imagined, and in the depths of space, human ships continued their patrols. Their crews were peaceful and professional. They followed all coalition protocols and treated other species with respect. But in the weapons lockers next to the standard coalition arms, each ship carried something else. Small devices marked with warnings in dozens of languages, weapons that had been used only once, during 8 months when humanity had shown the galaxy what war really looked like. The devices were never used again. They did not need to be. The galaxy had learned its lesson, And the lesson was simple. Do not wake the sleeping giant. Because when humans decided to make war instead of peace, they did it better than anyone else in the galaxy, even if it cost them their souls.